Aloha and welcome to part three of Digits. And this is a really cool part of the overall process because we're going to now start interacting with the database. Specifically, we're going to load some default data into the database when we start up, and we're going to publish that data to clients when they connect to the server and display that data in the user interface. So this is a really key part of any web application system, and I'm excited to show you how that all works. And it's not very hard, actually, when all is said and done. So we're going to, at the end of the day, create a page like this, and you might be saying to yourself, well, this page doesn't look really any different from what I did in the last one. And that's true. Visually, it doesn't look different, but under the hood, it's actually retrieving that data from the database as opposed to just that contacts field that we had in the class. So it's a lot cooler. So hopefully you'll watch this once before you start to get the sense for it. You want to merge your branch from the digits to part into master. I've already done that in my local environment, so I won't show you how to do that, but you've seen it before, so hopefully it won't be a big problem for you. And as always, I'd like you to try to do this twice. That may take a couple days because these things are kind of lengthy, but just take your time and do it. I think you'll learn a lot from repeating it. Okay, so let's get into it. We want to start our timer, and we want to start up our application using Meteor npm run start. Wait a second, I'm sorry. We have to first create a branch called digits collection 1 using GitHub Desktop. And actually, I'm going to contacts collection 1. And I'm going to create a branch called contacts collection 2 because I already went through this once, but I neglected to show you something. So I'm doing it all over again just to make sure that I do it just exactly perfectly. All right, so we've got this contacts collection 2 that I've created and published the branch to GitHub, done that. And then start up my application using Meteor npm run start. So let's go to the terminal window, and notice I'm running Meteor within my IntelliJ window. That is basically so that if there are any problems that are output into the console while we're editing stuff, you're going to see them right away. Okay, so I recommend you always keep this window displayed as you do development. So if problems occur, it's not buried and you see them. So now we have the app running at localhost 3000. So I'll go to here, create a new window, localhost 3000. There it is. And then similar to running the console within IntelliJ, I'm also always going to have the Chrome Developer Tools window open in my browser because, again, if there are any errors that occur while I'm running, I want to see those errors right away. And then finally, we've got the Meteor DevTools Enhanced running here, which can provide us information about Minimongo that will be very useful to us. But we'll keep this in the console level, the console pane for most of the time. All right, so might be useful just to log out and then sign in. So we'll sign in as john@foo.com, and just to see that everything looks good. So this is the way. Even though I'm logged into the master branch now, well, I'm in contact collection 2, which was forked, which was a branch off of master, and that contains the code from digits part 2. So I'm just kind of verifying that I'm at the place in the project where I want to be right now. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to define a new collection in Mongo called contacts, and that's going to hold our contacts. So to do that, we're going to create a copy of the stuff directory and call it contact rename um, stuff.js to contact.js. So we can go here, we can go to stuff, do a propeller C, go to API, and rename that to contact. And then inside here, we can do a refactor to rename stuff.js to contact.js. All right. Oops, contacts.js. Refactor contacts.js. Yeah, generally you name collections with a plural because a collection holds multiple documents. So that's why that's the kind of the best practice. Okay, inside contacts.js, we want to rename the collection to contacts, update the schema to provide fields first name, last name, address, image description, owner. Okay, so rename the collection to contacts. So I'm in here. Let me just look. Okay, so this will be contacts collection, contacts collection, and then I'm going to export an instance of this class called, we're going to call it contacts. Okay. And now we have to change the schema. So we need first name, last name, address, image, description, owner. First name, so first name, and then option last name. Oh wait, that's a string. Oh, come on. Here we go. String. And first name, last name, address. What were they? First name, last name, address, image, description, owner. Okay, then image, description, and then owner, and then condition can all go away. Okay, so there we have our schema. First name, last name, address, image, description, owner. First name, last name, address, image, description, owner. All fields are strings. Correct. Okay, update settings development.json with the sample contact data. Using the context field in list contacts.jsx as your guide. Using the contacts field in list.jsx as your guide, list context.js, edit settings development.json with a new field called default contacts. Edit settings development.json with a new field called default contacts that contains an array of sample data. Note you must add an owner field for 2 of the data items and owner field to all the items. Okay. You're going to add an owner field. We're going to use 1 email for 2 of the entries and another email for the other one. Okay, so now if I say default contacts, here's where things get kind of junk. So I'm going to take this array, and I'm going to just paste it. And what we're going to discover at this point, to our dismay, is that JSON format is syntactically somewhat different from regular object format in JavaScript. And so we got a lot of fixing to do to make it work. The first thing we note is that all of the keys have to be strings. So, for example, first name needs to be first name in quotes. So we can replace all of those. And last name needs to be last name in quotes. And address needs to be address in quotes. And image needs to be image. Boy, can't type today. Image. Oh, except there's more than, yeah, see, that one is wrong. It should just be 3 that are being doing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click that to do all 4, and then just fix that one. Okay, image, and then description. It's last. Description. All right. So now, okay, the second thing to note is that single quotes are bad. We need to have double quotes. So let's take all of our single quotes and change them to double quotes. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Okay, so we're getting closer. The last problem is that this plus sign, we can't have, we just need strings to be a single, can't use appending like that. So we have to go ahead, and then the last comma, you don't have trailing commas at the end of objects, so we have to get rid of that. And so, this is totally Mickey Mouse. And sometimes, I don't know what to say. Sometimes things are Mickey Mouse. As much as I really don't want them to be. Okay, and then this actually was supposed to be a quote. We could use single quotes inside without, it doesn't even like that. Let's just, yeah, let's get rid of them. Okay. All right, so now we've got our, oh, and then we need an owner field. So owner is John at food.com. Okay, we've added that. And Henry will have the owner, but then Tim will be admin. Okay, so there's our JSON. We get the check mark, which is extremely useful here. IntelliJ is really helpful at making sure that you've written syntactically correct JSON. So be sure you've got ESLint, running for that purpose. Okay, so we've edited settings development to JSON with a new field called default context, which contain an array of sample data. Add the owner field for 2 and the admin.com for the other. Good. Okay, now edit mongo.js to load the sample contact data on startup if there are no contact documents in the context collection. Alrighty. Let's talk a little bit for a minute. In fact, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to pause. Remind me to start up the clock again. Because what I want to do right now is spend a few minutes and remind you how default data gets loaded. So I said we're going to be updating this collection to load the default contacts if none of them are there. Okay? But let's first talk about how this whole idea of executing Meteor works. Okay? Remember that what we ran when we started this thing where is it? Is we did meteor npm run start. And what that command basically says, it says we're going to use the meteor version of npm, and then we're going to run that version of npm. We're going to run the script called start. When you say npm run, what you're saying is inside the package.json in the scripts area, there should be a field with the same name as what you're specifying on the command line, and it's going to actually invoke whatever the value of that field is. So you can see right down here, it actually ended up invoking this. So let's talk about what this line actually says. It says, let's bring up Meteor, minus no release check. Meteor has kind of an irritating tendency every time it's invoked to check the Meteor home site to see if there's a new release of Meteor, and if there is, it can start downloading it right then. We don't want that. So I'm adding the minus no release check so that it doesn't, when Meteor comes up, it doesn't bother to go see if there's a new release of Meteor out there. Minus exclude architectures. That's a keyword. Now that's a command line option that says when you're building your web app, Meteor actually builds several versions of the web app for different environments. So the one it has a normal one that it builds for modern browsers, but then to make it compatible with old browsers, it will also build a separate bundle that's larger and uses more primitive JavaScript to run on legacy browsers. And during development, we don't care. We don't need, this ends up being exactly the same code just for older browsers. We don't need to spend the time to have the build system doing that when we're developing. So this minus excludes architecture says don't build it for legacy. Additionally, there's another specialized bundle for the Cordova app, which enables native apps to be built with a web app code. We don't need the build environment to spend time doing that either. So we do this basically just to speed up the build process each time by telling the build system, don't bother with these other versions. Okay, then finally, and this is the most important one, we say minus settings, and then we give a path to a file. And what that says is, okay, when you bring up your web application, please read in the JSON file that's specified by this path and bind it to a global variable called meteor.settings. Okay, and then that code can be accessed within your app to do whatever it is you want it to do. So let's see what we want it to do. Now, the second thing you want to say is, well, when we say Meteor npm run start, what actually happens? Well, two things happen. Well, what happens right now is when we say Meteor npm run start, we're starting up the server. Okay, we haven't had any clients connect yet, but we're starting up the server. And Meteor has a convention which says if there is a directory called server in your app directory or in the directory where you're running, all the code within that directory is going to be executed. So we're going to execute all the code in this directory, and that means loading the file and executing the code in accounts, loading the file and executing the code in publications, and most importantly for right now, loading the code and executing the code in the file called mongo.js. All right? So we've bound the global variable meteor.settings to the contents of that settings file, and we're going to execute this file. Okay, and what does this file say? This file says when the server starts up, it's going to say, hey, we're going to define a function, that's fine, but then we're going to say if there are no elements, there are no documents, if there are no documents in the collection associated with this stuffs object, so if we go to stuff.js, we can see that stuffs is an instance of this collection. The collection field, so stuffs.collection, is bound to a Mongo collection on which we can call find to get all the elements and then all the documents, sorry. And then the count function to see how many of those documents there are. So if there are no documents in this stuffs collection, then if in our meteor.settings global variable, which is bound because of the way we ran that script to the contents of settings.development.json, if there's a field called default data, okay, which it is, there's the field, okay, then what we're going to do, is write out this line creating default data, and we are then going to say map through each element of that array, and the map will take this function defined using an arrow operator that accepts an element and calls the function add data with that element. And the function add data will say console.log adding blah, 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 and then calling the insert command on this stuffs.collection. So this is going to add all of the data in the default data field of our Meteor, of our settings.development.json file to the server Mongo database. Okay? All right. Let's continue. Okay, so where are we? Right. So we're going to edit mongo.js to load the sample contact data on startup if there are no documents in the contacts collection. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to do something very similar. We're not going to get rid of the stuff at all. We're just going to kind of add in new things, and at the very end of the application development, we'll strip out all the stuff that we no longer need. But for right now, we're going to keep it around because it provides nice kind of boilerplate code that we can use as reference, and that's very deliberate on my part. Okay, so we're going to import that contacts object, and then we're going to say if contacts collection.find.count equals 0, then if default contacts creating default contacts dot map data add contact, okay, which is not yet defined. All right, and so the way we get there is add contact, and we can say, adding last name and the owner, and then contacts collection dot insert data. Okay? Now, word to the wise. I'm going to tell you that many of you are going to mess up at this point. You're going to keep this as stuffs. Okay? In fact, what we'll do, let's just see if this works. And then we're going to make some changes and see how things blow up. So we got the green check mark. Okay? And forget what happens next. Okay, so we blah, blah, blah. Stop Meteor, invoke Meteor, reset to clear the database, then Meteor npm run start. You should see the following. Okay, so let's just follow along here and see if things actually are going to be the end. So stop Meteor, type Meteor reset to clear the contents of the database, and then Meteor npm run start. Okay, so here we go. Okay, so just like we hoped, we're going to first create the users, Then we create the default data from stuffs, and now we create the default contacts. We've created our 3 default contacts. We've inserted them. At least we think we have. Okay. Um, Now let's ask ourselves, what happens if we make some errors? So let's first see what happens. Let's just see what happens if we just type meteor. In fact, I'm going to pause here so I don't. Okay. So we just type meteor. What does this mean? It means we're not running our script, so we're not loading the settings file. We're also not doing that release check. We're building other bundles. Okay, so everything appears okay, and it's actually going to be okay because we've already added stuff to this collection, so none of this code is going to be wrong. So you might be typing meteor and thinking everything's fine, but it's not fine because you're never actually accessing the settings development.json file. And let's see when you run into problems. Now we're going to reset the database, and let's say we run meteor. What happens now? While this is loading, think to yourself, what's going to happen? Okay, so we're building for the legacy browser. That's junk. This is taking us extra time. It takes on my machine, it takes like 15 seconds longer if you don't have that exclude architectures parameter. Okay, so it says cannot initialize the database. Please invoke Meteor with a settings file. All right, so that is this line right here. So I did want to check to help make sure, that I know that for this application, we always definitely want some default accounts. And so when you don't provide the settings file, which we didn't right here, we're going to get this line printed out, which helps us understand that we need the settings file. Okay, so that's good. So that's what happens if we just do Meteor. Now let's do Meteor npm run start. Okay, and at least this time, so wait, let's stop. Okay, before we do that, let's make another change here. Let's say that we forgot to update this from. So we're going to call add data, right? So instead of calling add contact, right, we're gonna, or maybe better, let's pretend that we did do add contact, but we forgot to update this to stuffs. Okay, we forgot to update that to contacts. So now we're going to try to call the stuffs collection.insert. Okay, let's see how that goes for us. Meteor npm run start. Okay, so think in your mind, what the heck's going to happen now? Okay, hopefully something will go wrong. Okay, yes. Okay, what goes wrong is we get all this junk here. In fact, let's make this a little bigger. Okay, error. Name is required in stuffs collection.insert. Okay, so, and this is in Mongo.js line 16. So I keep looking down here to say, where's some code that I actually wrote as you look down the stack trace. And the code that I wrote is in add contact MongoJS 16. That's the last line of code that I wrote before it started running code that somebody else wrote. So line 16 is this line right here. And hopefully I look at that and I say to myself, why is it worrying about stuffs collection at a point when I'm actually adding something to the contacts collection? Okay? And what's cool about this is the reason why we get this error is because we, in all our definitions of our collections, we define a schema that says these are the fields that have to be present in each document, and then we attach the schema to the collection. And basically what that's saying is if you try to do an insert and you don't provide these fields, then the system will throw an error. Okay, so that's a way of making sure that the documents in your collection are the documents that you want them to be. All right, so it's nice. It's fail fast, right? It's instead of having a database that just has random bogus stuff, we're getting a data. We fail early so you can make sure that your code is correct. Okay, so let's see. Let's go here, and let's now change this to contacts collection. Okay, and we can type save all. Okay, and now it's restarting, and we actually added the default contacts. Okay, so we added Johnson, we added Casanova, we added Binstead. So we could proceed here. I'm a little nervous about that. So what I'm going to do at this point is I'm just going to do a Control-C, Meteor reset. I think it's presumably quite fine, but just to be sure, I'm just going to start over and make sure that the system runs without any errors. Now this is another reason why it's really nice to have your terminal window inside IntelliJ running while you're doing your development, because you see these problems as soon as they occur. All right, so we're starting bcrypt users. So users, default data, default context. Okay, so now everything worked the way we assume that it worked. If we go to digits, okay, let's go back to console. I think that was left over from last time. We could do a refresh. Oh, wait. So because there was this error, we've kind of left this browser in a bad state. So the best thing to do, in my opinion, is just to go back to localhost 3000 and reload the system from scratch. And then, that message is fine. Not sure if it stayed. Yeah, it just goes away if we try to reload one more time. Okay, so so again, keeping this window open, really useful because you're seeing what happens behind the scenes as these pages are loaded. All right. Okay, so let's continue on. Okay, so now we've got to the point where we've defined a contacts collection, we've defined some sample data, and we've loaded that data when the system starts up. Next step, publish the contact data to clients. That means that when a certain page is loaded, it's publish subscribe model, right? So we're going to find publications which say when a page subscribes to this specific publication, we're going to send some or all of the data from that collection over to the client. So in server publications.js, we're going to define a publication called contacts.userPublicationName that publishes all the contacts associated with the currently logged in user. Also create an admin publication name to publish all the contacts when the login user is the admin. Okay, so fortunately, this is going to be very similar to the way the Stuffs application works, in the sense that we're going to publish, well, first we've got to have a contacts collection. So we're going to import contacts from okay. Okay, so remember, the publish takes a string as a unique name for a publication. So the first thing we want to do is we want to create this unique string, and this unique string is defined in our definition of the contacts collection. And I designed this so that, once you made this unique string, then this .user publication name is going to be a unique string as well. And we've got one for users and one for admins. And if you had other roles, you could just add some more fields for whatever your roles are, and you're good. So so now we're going to say we're going to publish a new thing called contacts user publication name. That's the string. And this publication says, first of all, the user's got to be logged in, otherwise the publication does nothing. That's what return this.ready says is, okay, this function finishes, but you haven't actually published anything to the client. So first of all, if someone tries to subscribe to this and they're not logged in, which is what this .userid indicates, then the publication doesn't do anything. Secondly, once we know that the user's logged in, we're going to use this code to look up their username. So the user's Meteor, the global variable Meteor, has a field called users, which is bound to a Mongo collection containing data about all of the users. We can call find one with the user ID of the currently logged in user to return that document, and then the username field contains their username, which the way we're doing it is always an email address. So once we have that username, we can return all of the elements of the contacts collection for which that document, all the documents in the contacts collection for which the field owner has the value of that username. So that's how we return all the documents associated with the current user. Okay, and then also we want to do the same thing for the admin. We want to create a publication for admins. And in this case, we say, okay, if the user's logged in and that user has the role admin, okay, then we're going to return all of the elements in the contacts collection. Okay, so that's the publications. Okay, we created contacts user publication, contacts admin publication. So here's contacts admin publication, here's contacts user publication, and we return contacts collection in each case. Okay. So edit list contacts to display data from the contacts collection. So we're going to edit list contacts.jsx to remove the contacts field, subscribe to the contacts publication, and map through this.props.contacts to generate the displayed contacts. Okay, this is where the rubber hits the road. Okay, so now we're in list contacts. So let's get rid of this field entirely. Okay, and the second thing is we want to subscribe to we need probably import contacts from okay, we're going to import contacts. So we're going to say subscribe not to the stuffs user publication, but to the contacts user publication. And then we're going to return these properties. The first is the contacts associated with that user. Okay, and so the idea here, and then so just basically the way this works is we're going to figure out what our subscription is by calling Meteor subscribe, and then the string associated with a specific publication. So this says in this particular page, we want to subscribe to all the contacts associated with the currently logged in users. Now to get those documents into our mini Mongo database on the client side, we have to wait until this subscription is ready. So you can see here, we have the render method, which is a predefined method or a known method within a React component class. It says, look, check to make sure this.props.ready is true, and if it is true, then we render the page. Otherwise, we're going to display the loading icon because we haven't got the data yet. So this is basically our way of making sure when we call render page that the subscription has completed, and so therefore contacts is going to be filled up with all of the elements of the mini Mongo collection on the client side. All right, so notice that we don't have to say find only the documents associated with the currently logged in user in here. We can find everything because the subscription has already guaranteed that our client-side copy of the server-side database contains only the documents that this particular user should be able to see. Okay, so there's that. Now we have to change this to contacts because that's the field that we're returning, and otherwise we're going to have some kind of error. Okay. Okay, and then import stuffs, we don't need that anymore. And then the final thing is that we want to say this.props.context, because now the effect of this is to bind the this.props field with two additional fields, one called contacts and one called ready. The one we're interested in is the contacts field because that contains all our data. Okay, so at this point, ESLint is fine, and Meteor has refreshed. And so if we go back to here and go to digits and go to login, john@foo.com, change me, list contacts, kabam, okay? So notice that we're not showing 3 contacts like we did in the previous one. We're only showing the contacts that john@foo.com created. And the ones that john@foo.com created, we can check by looking in settings.development.json at our default contacts field. And John created this guy, which is Philip, and this guy, which is Henry. There we go, Philip and Henry. Okay. Now, coincidentally, this also verifies that the server side got loaded with the correct database, or the correct data, which I didn't check before, but I could have and should have. That would be involved bringing up a separate terminal window and invoking Meteor Mongo to look inside. Let's also go here to check. Now that we're on this page, we can see that the contacts collection is populated with 2 fields. Okay, and stuffs collection, we don't have anything because we didn't actually subscribe to anything on this page. And if we look at subscriptions, we can see we have this one called contacts collection publication user. Okay, so that's really good. All right, then if we log out and log in as admin@foo.com, the page should look like this. So let's do that. Sign out, sign in, admin@foo.com, change me. Okay, and if we go to list.contacts, bam, we're only seeing that one element. okay, because we're subscribing now. Well, we're still subscribing to the user one, and in the case of this page for this user, Minimongo will only have that one document. Okay, so now we're going to implement the admin page. We're going to make a copy of contact.js called contact admin, change the component name to contact admin, add a new card content field at the bottom that contains this.props.contact.owner, add an extra property. Okay, so we'll go to contact.js, and we'll do propeller C, call it contact admin.jsx, and then we can do propeller R, I think, and look for contact. There's only 3 elements, so we'll place it with contact admin. Okay. And then we want to add a new card.content. Okay, that's all I remember. Change the component name to contact admin, add a new card contact field at the bottom that contains this.props.contact.owner. Well, heck, let's just do it this way. So here we want to put in this.props.contact.owner and then add the extra property. Okay. So that's done. We look, ESLint says it's all good. Make a copy of the page list.context.jsx called listcontextadmin.jsx. Change the component name to listcontextadmin. So listcontextJSX, listcontextadmin.jsx, and then propeller R, list contacts. So there's just 3 of them, that's good. List contacts admin. So we replace all. Okay, let's expand this and see what's going on. And then we want to make a contact admin. We want this to map to the contact admin component. Okay, and then let's see what's wrong with this. Oh, import contact, right, so we've got to import contact admin. So contact admin, export default. I'm just checking, remember that there's no curly braces around it. That's because this is a default export. Okay, and there's this whole screencast about named exports versus default exports if you don't understand the distinction, but you'll get errors if you don't do the right, if you don't use the curly braces when you need them, and if you don't use the curly braces when you shouldn't have them, you'll also get an error. All right, let's go here. So subscribe to context admin publication rather than stuff.stat. Okay, so here, wait. Change the subscribe to context admin publication name. Contacts admin publication name. Okay, map to contact admin, not contact. Good. Change the title of the page to list contacts admin. List contacts admin. All right, in app imports app.js, make the admin route go to list contacts admin rather than list stuff admin. So in app.jsx, so finally we want to go to this page when we click on the admin. So list contacts admin, list contacts admin, and this is another place where you might forget to update all of these places. And so it's interesting to say, well, what error do you get if you keep this, for example, as list stuffs admin rather than list contacts admin? Okay. All right, so we've done all that. When you finish, the admin page should look like this. Okay, so we check here, client has been modified or refreshed. We've got this admin page. Let's go to console. Console is clear. Click admin. Bam. Okay, so the admin page now displays all of the contacts. We don't get any errors in the console window. We go to Meteor. We see that the contacts collection now contains all 3 of the items. We're subscribing to contacts collection now published the admin collection. All right. Check to see that, okay, there we go. Admin subscribes to a publication that gets all the contacts. Now let's make sure Meteor npm run lint. So we go back to here, Control C, Control C, Meteor npm run lint. Great. No ESLint errors. When our page renders correctly, Control C, we did that. Stop your time and note your time, 34. So I guess we'll call it 35 minutes. Commit and push the message contacts collection finished in 35 minutes. So contacts collection finished in 35 minutes. "35 minutes. And we push. Okay. Now to round 2. Okay. What you want to do now is first let's check to see that Meteor's not running. Since Meteor's not running, we can now go back to here, switch back to the master branch, and we can see that all our code goes back to the way it was before. So now, like, we're looking at list stuff admin, and there's no list contacts admin page, and list contacts is using this. So we're all back to where we were at the beginning of the WOD, so we can do it all over again. All right, there it is. Digits part 3, really great one. Do this a couple of times. Lots of opportunities for making tiny little errors that will create bugs. That's okay. That helps you learn how Meteor works by seeing what happens when errors occur. Don't spend more than 10-15 minutes without asking for help when you get into these problems. And be sure to ask a smart question. So you want to publish your branch with whatever is going wrong, and then allow people to download it and run it so they can reproduce the error. That's the best way to ask a smart question. It's a reproducible error by downloading and running code. All right, see you later.